Today we have Josh Weil, the candidate for U.S. Senate for Florida, speaking to us about his candidacy. And this is a follow-up to last month's Hispanic Caucus meeting when we received the candidate for U.S. Senate for Florida as well, called Will Sanchez. This initiative started because we wanted to hear about Mr. Sanchez's ties to the Latino community, but then the people present in our November meeting were very interested in hearing from other candidates for this important position. So we kind of started a series of meet and greet with candidates for U.S. Senate for Florida. If you missed our November meeting, you can watch the recording of the conversation that we had with Will Sanchez here. The other announcement that I wanted to do is that there will be a special election in Sarasota County on March 8th. We will be voting on a school referendum and single-member districts again. So please stick around after our conversation with Josh for the business portion of our meeting, when you'll hear about our activities that go beyond our monthly meetings. Now we're going to hear Josh Weil talk about his candidacy. Joshua Weil defines himself as Florida's progressive choice for the U.S. Senate for Florida. He earned his bachelor's degree in biology from Stony Brook University in New York. Since then, he has been involved with youth education, from being part of Orange County Public Schools as a math and science teacher, helping students improve their SAT scores, working to ensure access to education, to teaching in the Middle East. Joshua is an active member of his local teachers union and state teacher organizations in Florida. He was moved by his children and students to run for office, believing they deserve to grow into a society where we care about the facts, the planet, and each other. Josh, you go ahead.
My name is Josh Weil. I'm a high school math teacher in Central Florida, and I'm a progressive running for U.S. Senate. Oftentimes, actually here, I'm gonna, our website in the chat, people ask me what it means to be a progressive. And honestly, as a progressive who's been, organizing and working behind the scenes and reaching out, for political purposes with other progressives across the state, what it means to be a progressive is a different thing. We're putting together a statewide progressive ticket right now with federal candidates in House races across the state. And, we're kind of drawing an arbitrary line in the sand at Medicare for All, right? Saying that, if you don't support this, right? If you don't support the idea of Medicare for all in this country, ensuring access to healthcare for all Americans, then, you're a Democrat, but, not necessarily as progressive as we are. Now, for me, that's just the beginning, because for me, being progressive is about human rights. And, as a human rights candidate, inspired in the model of, I would say Jimmy Carter is a huge philosophical inspiration to me as a politician. Anything that's a human right, I believe, should be secured for and insured by the federal government. And when we have a government like the United States that in the year 2020 spent $9.8 trillion, right, which, to put in perspective, the second highest amount of money any government spent last year was China at 5.38 trillion. The third was the United Kingdom at 2.8 trillion. So we spend more than 3 times every government in the world, except one, and almost double that government. When you spend that much money, right, and you forget to take care of homelessness, you don't even take care of the 40,000+ homeless veterans in your country. It's a problem. I met with some people earlier this year from that are surrogates for Build Back Better and clean water, the clean water part of the infrastructure plan. And so there was a woman who was touring. She was from Northeast Kentucky. And she was going around on behalf of the Biden administration, talking to people about clean water. And she was showing us, she would show everyone, she's bringing around the country and showing one of her water bills. And it was from the summer of 1998. And on it, it had a little asterisk that said, warning, the water you receive may not be safe for human consumption. And that was as a result of an accident in the area, so in the Kentucky, Ohio region there, that had the way that they cleaned the coal. It was a coal bathing thing, and all of the like dirt and grunge from the coal where it was going had broke, and it was getting into the water supply. And that was in 1998. And in the year 2021, that had never been fixed. For the last 23 years, she has been receiving water bills that she has to pay. She doesn't have a choice. It's not like good old capitalism where if you don't like the water you're getting, you go vote with your dollars and choose a different, municipal utility company. She's been receiving water that was filthy and unclean and marked on the bills as unsafe for human consumption. And from the summer of 1998, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 presidents oversaw that and did not do anything about it. Joe Biden, being the 5th president, is actually the first one attempting to make sure that all Americans have clean water. And in the United States of America, it's an embarrassment that we don't ensure that every American has access to clean water. Clean water is honestly the easiest one. Clean water is the one where I go into crowds of staunch Republicans and they're like, well, what do you think the government should be doing all of this? And I'm like, okay, how about clean water? And they're like, all right, well, yeah, like clean water, of course. And they're under this assumption that like, that's a given. We already do that. Clean water, no one's arguing. From there, access to education. Like we have that in law, but we don't, we allow it to be broken. We allow states' rights to get in the way. We have systems of education, that are competitive and capitalistic in nature to ensure that, there's an incentive for states to, push forward or rise to the top and be in competition. Doesn't seem to be working for Mississippi. Mississippi hasn't been ranked higher than 48th in education at any point in the last 50 years. Right? We allow some states to have terrible education because we want to preserve their right to provide poor education. Even though we now know there's tremendous amounts of data showing that the more educated you are, the more likely you are to vote Democrat. Republicans know this. That's why Ron DeSantis has been on a war with education. That's why Rick Scott went on a war with education. That's why they make up invisible boogeymen enemies like Common Core and critical race theory, so they can attack education, because there's nothing more dangerous to the long-term success of the Republican Party than an educated populace. And that we allow some states to attack their own education system. But we're allowing Texas to put forth and throw out 180 books because basically the one common denominator of those 180 books that are on the list right now are that they all feature protagonistic characters that are not white, Christian, cis, het males. That's it. No one else is allowed to have agency or representation. You're only allowed one type of story of what a person should be, and that person should be like Greg Abbott. And that can't work. We can't allow states to be miseducating millions of people. They're not getting access to an education. Not in Mississippi, not in Texas. And if we don't do something about it, pretty soon, not in Florida. Housing should be a human right. Every American, there is no excuse. When, Mika mentioned earlier that I lived in the Middle East. From 2017 and 2018, my wife and I taught for one school year, and we lived in Kuwait. And we had filled out the information with an international, employment headhunter. When Trump got the Republican nomination, keeping our options open. And in 2017, we were offered jobs with a school in Kuwait, and we took them. And it turned out to not be the best fit for our family, but we had an amazing experience over there. And in this crowd, I'm sure, I know that this is a room with many people who have seen the United States from outside the borders of the United States, which is a phenomenal way to see it and an amazing perspective to be able to have. And one of the things that, we learned that was a little shocking to us, was that there is no guaranteed link between poverty and crime. Because Kuwait has lots of poverty. In fact, it's institutionalized. They've set it up. They pride themselves. Their focus in managing their economy is not growth. Like us, everything has to be about growth. In the United States of America, if our economy continues to grow, but it doesn't grow as fast as it was 3 months earlier, we sound the recession alarm. In Kuwait, they're not focused on growth. They're focused on economic stability. And one of the ways that they've ensured that is they make sure that different people have very set fixed income levels. And so Kuwaitis are up here. And then, there's people from certain countries that are in like a middle class, like Americans and Canadians and England and Australia. And then there's people that are in the bottom class, Bangladeshis and Filipinos and Indonesians, people that they really look down upon, and they keep in a very impoverished state. And despite the fact that they have this specifically designed impoverished state of laborers, they have next to no crime, because they have a system of universal housing and universal employment. Everyone in the country has a job. If you don't have a job, you go down and they send you to a job. Everyone has a job. And everyone has a place to live. And when you take out the desperation of homelessness and starvation, of unemployment, the crime goes away. We lived in a very, very poor, filthy neighborhood. It's where our school put us. They put us in the cheapest, poorest, most overcrowded place that they could. One of the reasons why this country wasn't the best fit for me and my family. And it was a little scary at first until, but that's because we're used to America. And then on the other end, I would talk to some of the kids, and the Kuwaiti kids it was a little funny sometimes, because they tell me how scary America was. Because in the Middle East, when in a country like Kuwait that has very little crime, they go out at 1, 2 in the morning. Women, my wife would go out to markets at 1 in the morning and go shopping, or, on a weekend or whatever. She'd go out late at night. Things were open late and you could go out, and it was completely safe to walk the streets alone at night. And these kids would tell me, they'd be like, I went to America and we tried going out at to get a bite to eat at 1 in the morning. And it was like the things we saw on the street were terrifying. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, don't go out. Like where were you? Where were you? You were in San Diego, you were in New York, you were in, yeah, don't go out at 1 in the morning. Like, that's a terrible, everyone in America knows that's a terrible idea. Nothing good's going on out there. And we just allow that. We just accepted that we're going to have this level of crime and desperation. But it's because we don't take care of people. It's completely foreign in other places, which means that it's optional. We choose to live this way. We choose to neglect people and create this. And that's what we have to end. We have every resource we need in this country to end homelessness, to have access to healthcare, to end medical debt, to end education debt, to have clean water for every American. All of these things we can do at $9.8 trillion a year. We could do for far less. The only thing we don't have are 50 US senators willing to vote yes. And we have 50 Democratic senators. We've had super majorities in the past, and we didn't take care of this. But the time is now. We have to. Right? When we need a series of legislation, we need to destroy the filibuster, and we need a series of legislation that builds on, that makes the New Deal, FDR's New Deal, pale in comparison. Because the truth of the matter is, FDR's New Deal was 30 years late when it came. FDR's New Deal came in the 1930s to build highways and roads and infrastructure. We had cars for more than 25 years at that point. It took more than 2 decades for the government to finally get to a place where they decided to build roads after we had cars. And we're in a similar standpoint now. The New Deal was necessary for the expansion of the federal government for a country that had gone from being agrarian to industrial and had a massive boom and a massive change in what it meant to live in America. And 25, 30 years ago, we went through the same thing, changing from an industrial country to a digital country. It's a very different thing to live and work in the United States of America today than it was, not in 1938, but in 1998. We have over 1 million Americans in Florida that don't have access to high-speed internet. Universal broadband as part of the Build Back Better deal is essential because every American, in order to access their education, in order to get jobs, needs internet. You know, I'll end with this. We were campaigning in Taylor County, which is north of y'all in the Big Bend. And I was going to meet some organizers there for a meet and greet. And I passed a Taco Bell. And I always notice Taco Bell because I love Taco Bell. I'm a vegetarian, and Taco Bell is like the healthiest vegetarian fast food option that you can get when you're on the road and driving around. And so I always keep an eye out or notice like there's going to be a Taco Bell. I'm not saying it's good like Hispanic, like don't get me wrong. It is a bag of sustenance. But it's a bag of sustenance I buy 2 to 3 times a week. So I noticed the Taco Bell and I see a big sign on their marquee and it says, right, open interviews every Tuesday, right? Must apply online first. You can't walk into the Taco Bell and apply for a job in Taylor County, a county of 15,000 people, unless you have access to the internet to fill out the application online first. You cannot live and work or succeed in America without access to high-speed internet today. It's where we are as a country, and we're 25 years behind, but we need to build that up and we need to provide for people because we can. And if we can and we don't, then not taking care of people is just immoral. So I'm at 15 minutes, 39 seconds. So I will wrap up there. And I know Mika said that we're going to have time for Q&A.
Thank you, Josh, for giving us your perspective. Most of us are immigrants or have immigrant family members, immigrant friends. So first question is, there are about 15 million people without the right papers in this country. We've been trying to solve this issue for decades, and we've never really come up with a good solution to this. How would you go about this in the US Senate?
Obviously, like what you're saying is, we need a clear path to citizenship. And, that's the term. I use those specific words because we've all heard those terms countless times from Democrats and Republicans alike, right? We need a clear path to citizenship. And the reason why they say it like that is because it's a mess. Our system is an absolute mess in terms of what it takes for people to come over, to stay, to maintain. We just had this year, we had friends of my children, my kids go to a small school around the corner and it's a nice tight-knit community. And, there was a sweet little girl named Mira from a Turkish family there who'd been at the school and with my boys for the last 3 years. And, the father owned a business here. And all of a sudden, he went back for his renewal and should have been run of the mill and there were problems and they just had to go back to Turkey. That's it. The fact that they had a life here, were members of a community, were part of the school, owned a business, like all irrelevant. At some point we need, I would even say, I am one for bringing more people to the table. I am not a fan of building bigger walls. I think that it's okay to have walls as long as, we're using that to have gates, as long as we're using that to, allow and have open and easy access through specific channels. But we have to do better. And at some point, we need to essentially make a common law citizenship ruling, similar to what we talk about in terms of old, common law marriage, where a couple that was together for more than X number of years, essentially have the rights of spouse in terms of an accident or something like that. And you know what, if you're here for X number of years, whether that's 5, 7, 10, right, we need to have just a clear method that's saying that if the bureaucracy of our system is not your fault, right? The bureaucracy of your system is not the fault, shouldn't be the reason why anyone who has come here and has worked or lived well in this country should have to leave or suffer. And at some point, it should just become common law citizenship, where if you've been here X number of years, you're here. That's it. If there have been no criminal penalties, no issues then you're here. And I think one of the biggest things that we need to do to continue to work for this is that we need to be spending more of our money working to help build up our neighbors. In terms of the issues with our southern border with Mexico, the way you stabilize a border is by ensuring that there are similar levels of economic development and security on either side of the border. When you have greater economic development and stability on one side of the border than the other, it's going to create, it's going to create a flow in one direction. And the best thing that we could do is work and invest with the Mexican government to build up and create stability and prosperity and security on the other side there. We should want all of our neighbors to have what we have, to be as wealthy, as prosperous, and as safe as we are. Because if our neighbors aren't living well, then we're not living well yet. It's just a facade. I hope that answers to some extent. Immigration law is an incredibly tangled mess, and we have a volunteer on our team that actually is a specialist in immigration law and handles these some of the specific questions for me. But just in terms of what we're looking at, we want clear pathways to citizenship. We want to make sure that dreamers are protected, and we want to make sure that people who are living well here can stay here. So that's anything, any specifics should be in the spirit of that.
Okay, how would you go about it tactically? The other party is thriving on xenophobia at this point. However, there is also some push for immigration reform on the Republican side. So how would you go about that tactically?
Well, I mean, you have to address the xenophobic issue first and foremost. And I would say second is the security issue. I think that in order to really move forward, we need to dismantle their arguments one by one. And so the first thing needs to be about, in stressing and combating that message, and reminding people that diversity is our strength. Diversity is what makes this country great. And in fact, the majority of our problems in this country still stem from colonialism. Because every single country in the world that was colonized by a European power hundreds of years ago has massive issues of racial and economic disparity. And the United States of America is no exception to that. We need to confront those things. We need to remind people that diversity is what enriches us. Cultural homogeneity is what creates otherness, right? And it's the reason why Republicans prosper more in places that are less diverse. And we need to be able to attack that in ways that help. We need to help really break down that and go where cultural homogeneity is, right? Where communities are entirely devoid of diversity. And, we need to develop programs and systems to help enrich them, to help, make accessible, affordable housing communities, to bring people in and help keep it safe. The next thing I would say is a security issue, which, as I said, we could go a long way on changing the perception of immigration in this country by helping to secure the southern border. And now the majority of it, I'm aware, is a lie. We know that, the number of the crimes, the things that are happening in this country, the things that Republicans say come through and happen at the southern border is predominantly just a falsification, completely made up. But we need to have a purpose and a tangible goal there that we're building towards. We need to be able to see it differently, and we need to be able to build things that make results. Because if we allow it all to continue to be foreign, the otherness, people are afraid of things that are different and other. And that goes to the diversity, it feeds the xenophobia, and it feeds the fear of the border, or what they think of in terms of Mexico and crime. We need to use our resources to solve and fix these problems. The majority of the cultural misconceptions about immigration stem from Mexico across this country. That's what people think of, and that's what they build and drive home on. And we can cure a lot of them the same way by addressing that. Even if we're talking about immigrants from, 100 other countries, addressing that fear is primary.
Hey, Josh, I was wondering, what is your thinking about the outrageous behavior of representatives like Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia, Lauren Boebert from Colorado, and Paul Gosar from Arizona? Do you think by removing them from the committees that they are involved, will that represent a level of correction for what is going on with these representatives just doing and saying whatever comes to their mouths, jeopardizing the lives of representatives like you or any other progressive or any other person that thinks different, and threatening with guns and all this, like inciting to violence to their followers? Do you think that just removing them from a committee, will that send a message?
So it's a start, and it's essentially what they have the power to do right now. What needs to happen is that we need to have criminal indictments for those that were involved in the January 6th insurrection. There need to be first and foremost consequences. The fact that the January 6th insurrection was allowed to happen immediately after a number of new Congress people were brought in, right? We had Lauren Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene were giving tours the day before on January 5th. These were two women who still didn't know how to find the bathroom. They had been there for less than 2 weeks, and they were giving tours to groups that were there for the Stop the Steal rally, right? There was explicit involvement, and criminal charges should be brought against them for that. There have to be consequences. Without consequences, you embolden them to repeat those actions and go farther next time. The other thing is the Republicans are banking on this. This has been a successful strategy to them, right? Which is essentially, kind of eventually figuring out what Democrats have still struggled with, which is that moderates, despite this mythical fairy tale that moderates are more electable, moderates don't win. We have 2 examples of moderates winning presidential elections, of the more moderate of the 2 candidates winning a presidential election in the last 40 years, 50 years, right? That's Bill Clinton in 1992, when he was gifted a third-party candidate named Ross Perot, who was another billionaire from Texas, who split and milked just enough conservative votes away from the incumbent president, George W. Bush, to help Bill Clinton win a number of states that he would not have won in a one-on-one battle with the incumbent president. And now in 2020, when Joe Biden won an election where all we had to put next to the letter D on the ballot was not Trump, and it would have gotten 81 million votes. Joe Biden won because he wasn't Trump. That was an election against Trump. And we had an amazing slate of Democrats in the primary. And I think just about any of them would have won head to head with Trump in similar numbers as Joe Biden. Moderates stand for the status quo, keeping things the same. And in a country where so many people, where the way things are now doesn't work for so many people, you can't get people excited about keeping things the same. The same doesn't work for too many people. For over 100 million Americans, the same isn't good enough. People need change. Obama turned out to be a moderate, but he won a massive historical election because he ran as a progressive. People want change. And when we run moderate candidates against extreme far-right Republicans, we lose. We saw it in 2000 when George W. Bush beat Al Gore. We saw it in 2016 when Donald Trump beat Hillary Clinton. And we're going to continue seeing it if we don't put progressive candidates up and we don't expand the left side of our electorate. They've expanded the right side so far that 5 years ago, Liz Cheney was the congresswoman from Wyoming, was considered the most conservative member of the House of Representatives. And today, they call her practically a liberal. They call her a moderate. They call her a rhino, Republican in name only. They have moved so far past her with the Matt Gaetzes and Lauren Boeberts and Marjorie Taylor Greens and the Donald Trumps. And we continue to try to push into the center and expand with cinemas and mansions. We have to do better. We need people who are going to fight for change. We need to expand the left side as well. So on one end, I think that that's how we combat the extreme right, because if we fill the middle while they fill the right, then people like Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney are going to become the political center of our country. Right? I'm perfectly fine with Joe Manchin being the political center. Joe Manchin can't be the far left. We've got to expand to the left of him. And then, yes, there has to be consequences. You know, it's this thing. The Republicans have been chanting, lock her up. And, you know, they're already talking about, you know, if they get control immediately, if they get control of the House and the Senate, the first thing they're going to do is impeach Trump and then impeach Harris because, you know, they'll have the votes to do so. And we get in and, you know, Joe Biden doesn't want to he doesn't want to set a precedent of going after the previous president with criminal charges. He doesn't want to set a precedent of attacking your political opponents. Or his political opponents they committed insurrection. They murdered Capitol area police officers. They tried to murder the vice president of the United States, the Speaker of the House, and multiple sitting U.S. Congress people. There need to be consequences for that. You know, at the very least, consequences, you know, as strong as, you know, what would happen if, you know, they were a Black person selling loose cigarettes on the sidewalk.
I think you have a very good understanding of the nuts and bolts of what's going on currently. I also wanted to cite a personal experience that I had related to water. The personal experience was the first time I went to Costa Rica and started to drive around the country, and towns that you would go to would have these little signs up. I forget whether it was yellow or whatever it was, but it was a symbol that the town had clean drinking water. And that was pretty much universal in Costa Rica. I was, of course, very reassured, but very impressed by what they have been able to accomplish. My comment, and it's really more of a comment than a question, but my comment is that it is to wonder and to to wonder, how do we address the issues that you're talking about from the perspective of getting some kind of agreement as to what is an issue? In other words, is clean water an issue for people of the United States? Does the leadership see it as an issue for these United States? Not somebody necessarily from Mississippi or Minnesota, but universally. And the same thing, I think, is true with the issues of immigration and many other issues that we have. So my question is, how would you propose to try to have a truth and reconciliation process, to use words, but to address and to try to get consensus about issues that confront these United States, not each and every state, but universally?
So, that's a problem that's a Democratic Party problem. The fact that we don't have strong, consistent messaging. And, if you look at that, you look at who was made, the head of the Democratic Party this year. They chose Jamie Harrison, not because Jamie Harrison, had, the platform that people were most excited about, not because, he represented the ideas of the people. They chose Jamie Harrison because he raised over $100 million for a U.S. Senate campaign in South Carolina against a sitting incumbent as a Black man. They chose Jamie Harrison because he raises money. And the amount of money that goes into these campaigns has gotten insane just in the last 4 or 5 years. To put it in perspective, in 2018, Bill Nelson lost to Rick Scott. He had raised $34 million in that campaign. It was considered a shocking defeat because Bill Nelson was considered one of the best fundraisers in the U.S. Senate. Bill Nelson being able to raise $34 million was like the top of the class, elite in terms of fundraising for a U.S. Senate race. The reason why Rick Scott was able to compete with him is because the Republican Party didn't have the resources to match that. Rick Scott had to put $30 million of his own money in order to be able to go against Bill Nelson, because the Republican Party couldn't afford to. They couldn't afford to have enough in reserve to back a gubernatorial candidate and keep something there in case Rubio got a serious challenger. They needed someone who could fund their own. So $34 million. Amy McGrath raised $114 million in a losing bid in Kentucky, losing by nearly 20 points last year. Jamie Harrison raised over $100 million. Just about every one of those contested races in Kentucky, in South Carolina, right? Every race is expected to be $100 million race now. It's nearly tripled what was the top of the line for candidates nowhere near the top of the line. And you don't get that money. You don't get that money $5, $10 at a time. You don't get that money in grassroots. That money comes from large corporations. It comes from lobbyists. It comes from corporations. And when that happens, the corporations and the lobbyists dictate your platform. In order for us to have messaging that relates, like you said, in order for us all to be on the same page about what we need or what we're fighting for, voting for, the platform has to come from the people. I was just watching, it was going around again today, the video of from 2018 of Marco Rubio going to the town hall with the March for Our Rights kids from Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, and just getting completely undressed and embarrassed by, a group of teenagers on stage, which was fantastic, by the way. And God, he says over and over in that, people buy into my brand. People want, he's telling the kids, trying to explain it to them like they don't get it. That no, like you don't understand. Like, because I was elected, that means people like, I get to do what I want. I don't have to do what's best for the people. They voted for me because they want my brand. People buy into who I am. They want me, so I get to do whatever I want. Carte blanche. Marco Rubio is deciding his platform based on what's best for him and who gives him money. We have to be different and better than that. When we do the same thing as Democrats, we're not appealing to anyone different. We cannot activate our electorate, get people excited, and get people out there for change. We cannot be better than the Republicans when we do the exact same thing the Republicans do. Hillary Clinton, like, tell me, what was Hillary Clinton's platform in 2016? Right? Again, the moderate platform, this policy is built on corporations and lobbyists. It's not about meeting the needs of the people. You know, now I have not been traveling the country. Traveling the entire state of Florida has been, you know, laborious enough. But we've been everywhere from Pensacola to Miami, and our platform evolves as we travel because we meet people, we talk to people, we find out about needs that don't make the news, needs that people aren't talking about on Facebook. Because after 23 years of Republican leadership in this state, there are needs everywhere. And we build our platform based on meeting those needs. And nationwide, that is what the Democratic Party needs to do. The Democratic platform, and again, you know, I would say Bernie Sanders and the progressives are the ones that are closest on that. But the Democratic Party's platform should be about meeting the needs of the people. And if it was, we'd stop losing to insane sycophants like Donald Trump.
A question that is quick for you to answer is that if you are going to take campaign money from corporations?
We do not. We take no money from corporations. We do accept money from PACs, but only PACs that are, you know, philosophically agreeable, that we, you know, and that's important, you know, for us. You know, our campaign is going to really live or die on getting a lot of large national endorsements from large progressive groups like Our Revolution, Courage to Change, Warren Dems, Justice Dems. You know, we're going to need that money and that support in order to be able to get our message out and have boots on the ground and be able to pay people to go out and have the real conversations that we need to break through misconceptions and to, you know, take down Marco Rubio, because his entire persona is a lie. Like, his entire persona is a charade. Like, the idea that he is some unbeatable candidate, right? He's never been tried. The Democrats tried, you know, they literally in 2010, Karen Harmon, the FDP chair, called Bill Clinton down to try to talk Kendrick Meek out of dropping out of the race. They provided no support to the Democratic candidate, tried talking him out of the race. And in 2016, when Marco Rubio came back into the race after his presidential bid, they again withheld all support and just rolled their money over, figured they'd save their money for the next governor's race in 2018, and provided no support to Patrick Murphy. Marco Rubio has not run a contested race. We've seen him run one big contested race when he ran for president in 2016, and he came running back to his US Senate race with his tail between his legs. Marco Rubio can get flustered on stage. Marco Rubio can be beaten. He has to be contested. And in order to get out there and actually get to enough people, we're going to need those big endorsements. So we do accept PAC money, but only from progressive or philosophically minded PACs. We do not accept money from lobbyists or corporations.
Thank you for that answer. And so building on what you were saying before in terms of, you know, the carte blanche to do whatever they want because they have been elected, this is something that happens within the Democratic Party as well. And this happens at every level in the Democratic Party, including our own in Sarasota County. So it seems that the people that got elected, they forget that they are representatives all along. So they were representatives when they got elected, but now they don't have to consult or hear the people anymore. So a part of my question, and I'm going to ask the two parts of my question because they relate to the same point, and then you can answer them both. So a part of my question is how to go about this modus operandi that that the Democratic Party has within, because you have a primary. So you were talking a lot about Marco Rubio, but before that, you have to win your primary. And probably because you're not a centrist, you probably won't get that support from the Democratic Party. So how to go about that is a part of my question. And then another part of my question is, so in regards to education, and again, talking about the very mentality within the Democratic Party, our party, I was the other day at a Hispanic Caucus meeting of presidents of Hispanic Caucus of Florida, okay? And people were complaining very validly that we have not received money from the Hispanic State Caucus to fight disinformation like we need. And it's true that we need, but in the same meeting, people were speaking against free college for all. And in my mind, the best way to fight disinformation is a college education, or is education in general. So I think there's a lot of contradiction there, because it's like an immediate thing. Oh, we need to fight disinformation now, so we need money for that. But there isn't a long-term view. Well, with education is how we fight disinformation. So there's also a huge battle within the party. So I wanted you to talk about that, including, how are you going to do it to win this primary?
Yeah, I mentioned Marco Rubio because Marco Rubio is what we have, and it's the reason why I'm running, because we need better than Marco Rubio. Just about any candidate in this race, would be better than Marco Rubio. Val Demings is not a progressive. She is more progressive than Marco Rubio. Val Demings would be a better senator or representative. Unfortunately, Val Demings is also going to represent the large corporations that gave her, the $8 million she was bragging about having earned in 1 month. We're not going to see a Medicare for all system that abolishes the health insurance industry when we allow candidates to accept massive contributions from Cigna and Aetna and Blue Cross Blue Shield, because that's who she's going to work for. It's the same thing with a number of the other candidates. Now, going around the state, what I've seen is that people want and need more. Our message has been incredibly well received. We get a phenomenal response everywhere we go. It's just about getting out to more people. And I do believe that, we can win in the primary as long as we get our message out to enough people, which is why I'm here tonight, why I was physically at an event in, where was I last night? St. Augustine. Why we continue to travel and continue to get out. Next year is going to be huge. The party, it is very unlikely, right, that we are going to be able to convince the party anything else unless we win. You still hear, right, how excited. You mentioned Andrew Gillum to, big party organizers across the state. And so many of them love him. A number of them are still severely butthurt that he beat Gwen Graham because that was their big moderate that they had in plan. They didn't want anyone else, running against her. They didn't want anyone else, stealing her thunder. They had chosen their candidate who agreed to follow their rules and campaign their way and use their platform. And they did not like having a candidate who they could not control their campaign or platform of. We want to make sure that they're that uncomfortable again this year. We want them to be that uncomfortable every year until they stop thinking that they can control the platform and the choices that the people in Florida have. The only way we do that is win. And the good news is there's a tremendous amount of pressure on Manny Diaz to deliver a victory. I'm not convinced that Val Demings is going to be that person. And that's not a that's not to, me saying that like I'm the favorite and I've got her number. I'm not convinced she's going to be on the ballot in August. And I will tell you that as someone from Central Florida, I watched Val Demings step in and step back out of 3 different races before she finally found her seat for U.S. House, that she had a comfortable win in. I do not believe that Val Demings wants to be out of office, and I do not believe that she wants to lose a statewide race. And if Biden's numbers are still sub 40% come April when it's filing deadline, and if Val is still in the most recent poll 9 points behind Marco Rubio, I don't think she stays in this race. Nor do I think the Democratic Party of Florida should want her to. Nor do I think that they should want to give up a big name, charismatic, nationally popular congresswoman when you're throwing moderate policies at an incumbent Republican in a year that might turn into a red wave. We have to break past that and go bigger. So yeah, I think that we could wind up seeing a really open race once the ballot's finalized in June. I think even if it isn't, that there are too many people that are not excited for a big corporate moderate candidate. I hear people tell me all the time, how does someone like Val win? Like, Val is not as exciting as Andrew Gillum, right? Val is not trying to pitch policies that could have an impact. Andrew Gillum, as a progressive governor in Florida, could have changed the lives of every person in this state. Val is not even pretending to fight for things that could improve people's lives in this state. How is she going to excite people and get them out? And look, we saw that people all around Florida are still hella racist. Like, we know this. I saw on down the street from my house, a man built a large wooden sign with incredibly racist things about Andrew Gillum that he put out on the street. Like, we saw the response to a strong Black man running for governor. We also saw the response to a strong white woman running for president when she didn't win Florida in 2016. And we think that there's not going to be that response, that we're not going to, kick the hornet's nest on, the Ku Klux Klan, all far-right Republicans that are throughout this state. And look, we might do the same thing with me, because I'm not going to be making them happy, and I'm not going to be tiptoeing around them or trying to comfort them in their hatred and misogyny either, right? But you've got to offer something else, because those bastards are going to come out and vote. They came out and voted in record numbers for Ron DeSantis, and they're going to come out and vote again in record numbers. We've got to excite people. We've got to get everyone fired up and, that this is something they believe in, that there is a chance to make things better. You can't win without that. Val's not bringing that to the table. She brings things to the table I don't, but she's not bringing that. So, we have to do better. And, that's what the primary is supposed to be. Al Fox is going to come here next week, and he's going to tell you what I've heard him tell a number of people, that the reason we have a primary is so that way the people of Florida can decide what they want their platform and who they want their candidate to be. It's not supposed to be a coronation cycle for the platform and candidate that are chosen by the heads of the party. And we can change that long term by winning, not just winning a primary like Gillum did, but winning the race, because we need incumbents to set our platform. We have not had that. We had Bill Nelson, who wasn't setting a thing. And we haven't had a Democratic governor since Buddy McKay served the last 8 days of Lawton Child's term when he passed away tragically in early January of 1999. We haven't had a Democratic governor since Jeb Bush was sworn in January of 1999. Right? Marco Rubio's seat has been held by Republicans since the 80s. Right? We have not had a statewide Democratic candidate who is passionate about policy and the needs of the people, setting that for the people. I heard a great story when I was in the Panhandle this year about Bill Nelson. It was either Santa Rosa or Okaloosa County, the second or third one from the end. And a guy was telling me how Bill Nelson used to be super popular there, that he came through there at one point and he had a huge town hall with all the small business owners, and all of these local business owners came out and met with him. And he said more than half of them were probably Republican, but like the US senator sat there with them and talked with them and listened. And like, man, they all left there. Everyone who left that building loved Bill Nelson afterwards. And, you know, they supported him, whether they were Democrat, Republican, whatever, it didn't matter because he was their senator. And I'm like, that's amazing. I'm like, I love to hear that. I never hear about big statewide candidates coming out to places like this. I'm like, when did that happen? The guy goes, 2005. So 13 years before Bill Nelson lost to Rick Scott. And I would bet you anything that if Bill Nelson had gone back out there and did that again, even in 2015, if he did it once a decade, he'd still be our senator right now.
Josh, so would you like to just do a little closure on your meeting, your conversation with us today?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me out here. You know, it's incredibly important that, you know, anyone who feels or identifies as being a member of a marginalized group in this country, you know, has access to their political candidates, to their elected officials, and has their voice heard, and you know, their agency being represented. And so, you know, I can promise you one thing, it's that, you know, I will continue to listen, and I will continue to fight for you and represent you as a candidate. And if elected, I'll still be coming to things like the Sarasota Democratic Hispanic Caucus meetings to talk to you and touch base and make sure that your voice is heard and your needs are met. Because that's what our elected officials should be doing. They shouldn't work for the NRA. They shouldn't work for Blue Cross Blue Shield. They should work for you. End of story.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for coming and talking to us, Josh.
Have a great night.
Thank you. And moving on, I wanted to talk a little bit about the March 8th special 2022, of course, special election, where we're going to have to battle again to keep single member districts alive because, of course, the Republican county commissioners want to take it down. And there's also the school referendum that we're going to vote on.
Yeah, I just wanted to provide a little more background. It's personal for me at this point. Single district voting is something a lot of people in Sarasota County fought for. We have thousands of people who actually knocked at doors, called people to get this passed in a referendum in 2018. It passed with 60% of the vote, but county commissioners, sitting county commissioners don't like it. They don't like it because this is a way for people to get elected that are closer to their constituents. Before that, we had the whole county voting for all candidates. There's no way for a candidate to talk to all 350,000 Sarasotans. So what we did have were campaigns that were funded by developers, wealthy individuals, which had a lot of TV components, social media components that are expensive, and essentially the people with the biggest pockets, the deepest pockets won. That changed in 2018. It was really interesting. It didn't mean that necessarily a Democratic candidate would get elected, but there were actually competitive primary races between Republicans. So that changed things. The county commissioners reacted by saying, oh, you were all wrong. You didn't understand the question right. Voters didn't read the question well, so we need to have a revote on this. They first tried to get the Charter Review Board to actually turn over and schedule a new vote on this. The Charter Review Board, which is essentially the beholder of the county's constitution, said no. We've had a lot of input from people. People wanted this. We had a referendum on this. You county commissioners do the dirty job yourselves. The county commissioners went and put a survey, a taxpayer-funded survey out there in front of Sarasota voters. Even in this suggestively worded survey, a plurality of voters said, no, we like single-member districts. So 2 days ago was the county commission meeting in which dozens of people showed up, spoke very eloquently why they had voted for single-member districts, and we still had 5 county commissioners voting, no, this should go back for a vote. So at this point, I take it personal. This is an imposition by elected officials who believe they know better than their voters. I'm very optimistic. The coalition that will win this referendum on March 8th was right there in the county commission chambers. It was African Americans. There was a Hispanic gentleman from Northport who was talking. There are independents, there are Republicans. There was a head of a Republican club who spoke for this. So this is a very interesting and unprecedented coalition. And I think it would be really great to have the Hispanic Caucus do their little part of mobilizing voters and making sure that everybody shows up in this special election that will have, sure, a very low turnout, and that they will vote for grassroots democracy.